The supermarket's fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting pale halos over rows of nearly empty shelves. It was late afternoon, the time when everyone else seemed to be in a rush, carts squeaking and voices low with irritation. Ethan stood in line clutching a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and a few instant meals. At 24, he was used to making do. He had been working double shifts at a warehouse to cover his bills and still couldn't seem to get ahead. His phone buzzed with overdue notices he couldn't bear to open. But as the cashier scanned the items of the woman ahead of him, the rhythm of his own thoughts broke. The woman's hands shook as she counted coins from a worn purse, her two small children clinging to her coat sleeves. The cashier's polite smile flickered as the total remained unpaid. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the way one simple act can ripple outwards, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Hidden Hearts. These stories keep hope alive in a world that badly needs it. Ethan watched the woman whisper to the cashier, her face reddening as she pushed back a carton of eggs to reduce the cost. One of the kids began to cry softly. Something inside him shifted. Without thinking, he stepped forward and slid his debit card across the counter. "I've got this," he said quietly. The woman turned to him, eyes wide, lips trembling as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. The cashier's scanner beeped, the transaction went through, and the children's faces brightened as the groceries were bagged. Ethan only smiled awkwardly and shrugged off her thanks. He picked up his bread and milk and left before she could ask his name. Outside, dusk had fallen. The sky above the parking lot was streaked with orange and violet. Ethan sat in his old car for a while, hands gripping the steering wheel. He had less than $100 left in his account and a tank only half full of gas. But there was a strange warmth in his chest, as though for a brief moment he'd stepped out of his own struggle. He drove off without knowing that the simple decision he'd made would circle back to him before the night was over. Back at his small apartment, the heat had shut off again. The landlord had been ignoring his calls. Ethan wrapped himself in a blanket and scrolled job listings on his cracked phone screen. Warehouse, security, delivery, each one felt like another year of exhaustion. He closed his eyes and thought of the woman's grateful face, the way the little boy had reached out as if to touch his hand. He wondered who they were, what story had brought them to that checkout line. A few hours later, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him swipe to answer. A gentle female voice introduced herself as Caroline, a manager at a local community center. She said a woman had given her his number. "She wanted me to tell you thank you," Caroline said. "And, are you looking for work?" Ethan blinked. She explained that the woman he had helped was part of a program at the center and had told them about his kindness. They'd been looking for someone dependable to assist with logistics for a new outreach project. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid more than the warehouse and came with benefits. The next morning Ethan walked into the community center's old brick building, sunlight filtering through tall windows. Children's drawings decorated the walls. Caroline met him at the front desk and shook his hand warmly. She led him through a bustling hallway where volunteers packed food boxes and sorted clothes. Ethan felt a buzz of purpose in the air, a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he'd been craving. She showed him the storeroom he would oversee, explained the schedule. And within an hour he'd been offered the position. He stepped outside afterward, blinking in the daylight, the offer letter clutched in his hand. Weeks turned into months. The job at the center became more than just a paycheck. He learned names, heard stories, saw faces light up when they received help. He found himself staying late to repair shelves, to help a child with homework, to carry bags for the elderly. He realized his own despair had begun to lift in the company of people working together for something bigger than themselves. And every now and then he saw the woman from the supermarket, her name was Maria, volunteering at the center's kitchen, her children running down the halls. They would exchange shy smiles, a shared secret of how one small act had opened a door. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the center's rooftop, Caroline called Ethan into her office. She told him the board had been impressed by his dedication and they wanted to promote him to operations coordinator. It meant a full salary, health insurance, and the chance to design new programs. Ethan sat there stunned, remembering the night he'd sat shivering in his apartment with a loaf of bread and overdue notices. All of this because he had stepped forward for a stranger. As he locked up the building that night, Maria and her kids appeared at the door with a basket of cookies. "For you," she said simply. Her little boy handed him a card drawn in crayon. a stick figure man paying for groceries, a rainbow overhead. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He crouched down to their level and thanked them, the card trembling in his hand. When he left the center, the air was cool and clear. He climbed into his old car, the engine coughing but starting anyway. He sat there for a long moment staring at the crayon drawing. The world outside hadn't changed, bills still came, life was still hard, but something inside him had shifted permanently. He had discovered that kindness was not just a moment but a turning point, a light in the dark that could guide you somewhere new. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Hidden Hearts. Your support helps more stories of real-life kindness and second chances reach people who need hope. And before you go, we'd love to know, has a small act of kindness ever changed your life? Comment below and inspire others.